Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this little bit of a delay, but we normally have our intro and are very jubilant tonight, but unfortunately, we do have some sad news to report as the wrestling world lost an icon over the weekend. From ECW, the legend Sabu passed away at the age of 60 on Sunday night, and tonight's opening part, including the 10 bell salute, will be in memory of the one, the Sabu, who a lot of people will say is a trailblazer in this industry, and he is somebody who really put extreme wrestling and Eastern Chain wrestling on his back. Stays, and guys, I apologize for my internet connection right now. It is, I don't know what the heck's going on here now. Show up. The heck's going on here now? All right, let me. I have nothing else open. So now why are we not showing the pic? Holy. The hell's going on here now? StreamYard's not responding to me now. Come on. All right. Let me do this now. Let me do this now. Let me figure this out now. Guys, I apologize.
Hey.
All right. Hold on. Okay. Okay, thank God. Jeff, I'm going to bring Jason in. Let you take care of that. I'm going to hop off and figure out what the heck's going on with my internet right now.
Sure.
Unless you don't have the ability, do you?
To do what?
Well, to bring the guest in.
I cannot. I don't have access. So if you bring him in and then you do you, I'll take care of that. Okay.
All right. Yep. Guys, sorry for the mix-up with all the technology problems. Obviously, it's Jon, Jeff. Jeff, how you doing tonight?
I am good, John. Doing better than you, it looks like.
And what is it? What is it? Now your internet's good. Now my internet's the one that's screwing up?
I think so. But why don't we bring our guest in and we'll
guys,
go from there.
You guys are going to have a great interview coming up right now. I will not fortunately be on for this one because, again, I'm trying to figure out what the heck's going on with the internet. But as soon as I can get the internet fixed, I'll be back on. Guys, want to bring in our guest right now. Obviously, you guys know we lost a legend. Oh, wait, I should be good now. I'm going to have to hop off. Guys, we lost a legend this past weekend in ECW Superstar Sabu. And we figured somebody who can talk very well about him, Jeff, is somebody who actually shared a locker room with him. And he is, you talk about ECW, we talk about ECW now, this many years later, and we still talk about how it revolutionized the game. And one of the key pieces of that is our guest this evening. Guys, I want to introduce you guys to the show for the first time. The one, the only, the ECW legend himself, Mr. Jason Knight. Jason, how you doing this evening? And thank you for joining us. I wish it was on better terms, but again, thank you for joining us.
I'm doing well, thank you. Yes, I wish so too. But, here we are.
Yeah, Jason, I too want to thank you.
Again, sorry for what you saw before with the.
I didn't mean to talk over you there, John. I'm sorry about that.
No, you're good. Hey, you're good. I'm going to probably hop off here in a second to figure out what's going on with my internet quickly. So I will be back in a minute.
Sure.
All right. So, Jeff, you're good.
No problem. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I wish it was under better circumstances that you and I could meet.
Yes, of course. Yes.
You and I had the pleasure of talking for a good 10 or 12 minutes before the interview began today.
Yes.
And you shared with me a detail right at the end that a very sombering detail. Do you want to share that with the audience about the connection between you and Sabu and your birthdays?
Oh, yeah. Well, his birthday is actually, he was born on December 12th, but 1 year after I was born. So, but we share the same December the 12th. He was born in 1964. I was born in 1963. So, yeah, it's just one of those interesting things. And, ironically enough, he would have turned 61 this year. That's very sad news.
It is very sad news. And I shared with you as a fan, as a 40-year fan, I can't imagine what it's like for you as a coworker, a professional, someone who's worked so close and intimately with these folks. But in a way, in an essence, we as fans, we mourn, we share, we feel your pain, we see the pain, and we share that with you because we see you guys every week on TV. We feel like we know you. We feel like you've given us such a part of your life, especially somebody at the caliber of Sabu, who really did put his life on the line every week, it seemed like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, it's a large family when you look at it. It spans over the across the world, you know, because
Yep.
you work everywhere and you meet a lot of people, and you do get close to uh, a lot of these individuals that you work with. So it's a large family, and unfortunately, there are a lot of losses. So you know, it's never easy. But you know, to me, Sabu always he always appeared very immortal. You know, because of all that he,
Mm-hmm.
you know, almost like a cat with not 9 lives, but uh, 9 lives. So I mean, every time he performed, he always give you that impression that, oh my goodness, you know, that's why Paul Heyman said homicidal, suicidal,
Genocidal.
death
Yeah.
defying. You know, he always seemed to be death defying to me. And then, you know, you kind of Mother's Day, it's basically, you know, I wish my wife and my mother a happy Mother's Day, and then learned, you know, the sad news. So it's
Jason, I've seen you perform. I've watched you perform. I know you can go. Do you think on, on any given night you could go to the level that Sabu would go to with the tables, with the chairs, with just the let's take away the props, just his speed, the way he could move on the ropes, the
no,
way he could jump. I mean, people forget how athletic Sabu was without the props, without the gimmicks.
well, that's I think it's impossible to forget because you know it was so unique, and you know I mean props were there, and he pretty much uh, he pretty much introduced that unique style. But basically, as far as a professional wrestler and an athlete, he was amazing, and you know he always had that great conditioning, and he was
Mm-hmm.
and have very long matches, in fact, and he would start him strong and finish him strong. So you know, very very unique athlete. Yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of
the term, you know, on our side of things, you know, work rate, you know, how a wrestler can, you know, perform. His work rate was always rated very, very highly.
yeah.
You didn't see a lot of arm bars and headlocks for an extended period of times in a Sabu match. Not that those are bad; those are needed. It's just, again, people forget how athletic and just how fast and agile that guy was.
Well, I believe that he knew that he had to be different. You know, he wasn't exactly the largest wrestler out there, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, so basically, you know, in a big man's world, sometimes that can go against you. So he sure found something. Again, I have to repeat the word unique, very unique, and he found that niche that no one uh, could duplicate at the time. And of course, then later on, many people imitated him, and a lot of them get, you know, they get pretty close. And even the younger athletes that are excellent at what they do, as far as trying to imitate Sabu, but he's still the original, you know. So it's like you know you can try, but you know it's not the same thing, you know. He is, you know, because look, in '93 when I first joined the ECW and we saw him work, he left the audience and he left the locker room in awe.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause no one's really
Yeah.
seen, you know, and he had a very unique look. He had a very unique style. he was always in great shape, so he looked the part. Therefore, it was just that combination of all, excuse me, of all these gifts. And a lot of people would say, well, yeah, because the Sheik was his uncle. I think that had very little to do with it, other than the fact that they looked alike, and the Sheik might have helped him out and brought him here and there. But Sabu always ultimately started. Sabu ultimately started from the bottom. There was I don't believe the fact that there were any favors. He just happened to he just happened to be able to put over the fact that he was just as different as his uncle was, and just as interesting to watch. But I think that him being related to Sheik had very little to do for as far as his success, because he struggled like anyone else did. As far as bookings and honest paydays and things like that.
I could actually you could equate that to your entire roster in the ECW as a whole, Jason, because you guys really had to redefine what we Marks thought of as wrestling. Wrestling to us was big guy versus Hulk Hogan. It was good guy versus bad guy. Early 80s, a lot of mat wrestling. You were part of that redefinition of what wrestling would later become.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Sabu, was such a huge part of it, because as I recall, it started from one spot that was popularly used by him. Let's say one table, one chair, one this and that, and then it started kind of like elevating, to a point where, I remember him saying, he's like, "What am I going to do? They're still going to do it, but I'm the guy that brought it here, because I think he was so influential, that a lot of us, we followed through, meaning that I did not necessarily jump through the tables, but I was the guy, that was more than willing to lay there and be put through one or two or more,
That was going to be my next question was, how do you follow that? So, you would work with guys like Sabu or Sandman or other talent.
I would lay on the table.
They'd lead you, but how do you follow one table, one chair, one cane, one, shot?
Well, it's unfortunately, ECW is no longer around, or is it? So basically, you never know, but maybe you ought to leave that to Paul Heyman.
That guy, Paul will forget more about wrestling than I will ever know. And that guy is such a genius. The way he could tell a story, the way he can, book, the way he could just come out and sell. We have a friend, Billy, who has a saying, once a mark, always a mark. And it doesn't matter how many interviews I do with performers like you. When I see somebody like Paul perform, I feel like it's the first time I'm watching wrestling. It's the first time I'm seeing that story. It's
yeah, it's magical, and that's why. And again, getting back to Sabu, he's been around for quite a while before that, but it took Paul Heyman to truly put him on the map, especially where we were at the time, basically, East Coast, and to make something very, very large out of it. And then, of course, I remember what was so incredibly creative was when he would have the handlers, and he would be chained to a hand, and he would wear the actor mask. I thought that was ingenious, and then he would break free and just hit the ring, and that was ingenious. I mean, very
One Jim Cornette is very critical of everybody and everything, but one thing that Jim Cornette says about Paul Heyman is that he was able to bring out the best of you and your roster, and highlight your best attributes and hide your worst.
Yeah, well, that's what makes a creative genius, because anybody can get, can be given a finished product, a beautifully polished diamond, and then just put it on the ring and say, here, this is my creation. But when you receive it rough and you cut it the way that you see it shining through in the future, then you're a genius. I mean, anybody can, basically, you can buy a new car, but, try building one. So.
Exactly. I don't know. Do you have a few more minutes, Jason? Can we kind of go over a little bit of what we talked about earlier? Is that okay with you?
Yes, of course.
So I had the pleasure of, listening to you talk about your very first match against one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, one of the most underrated wrestlers of all time. Tell me about that, who it was and where it was.
Well, my first World Wrestling Federation at the time experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Was actually in Quebec City, Canada. Was it in Quebec or was it Ottawa? I mean, you have to forgive me, but yeah. No, I'm sorry. It was in Ottawa. And it was versus Rick Martel.
The model.
Yeah. I mean, at that time, and I was amazed, that he was actually being booed because, the fans were conditioned not to like him because he was the heel, So he was basically in his own hometown. So, yeah, that was a hell of an experience. And, what was I saying that, oh, yeah, athletically wise and just as a wrestler, he's above and beyond a lot of these champions, that have been world champions multiple times, it's just, again, you said it right. He's most underrated, and basically, it was a pleasure.
So when we were offline, you said that you might have wrestled him in Quebec, and he was the heel. Actually, and I didn't want to step on your toes, but he's from Quebec.
Yes. Yeah,
and there would have been no way Rick Martel would have been a heel in Quebec.
Yeah.
That would be like Bret Hart being a heel in Calgary. That just would not go over.
No, this was Ottawa, but
Ottawa makes more sense. Ottawa, because
but I do
Ontario and Quebec, they do not, they coexist as one country, but
I do recall wrestling in Quebec, but that was later for another company, so I had the two mixed up.
So you go from WWF, you had your run on the on the indie scene like everyone. You had some tryouts. You get to wrestle Rick.
I worked for WCW before I worked for the WWF.
I was going to get there, yeah. And then you get to WWF. You get to work with Rick the Model Martel, and then eventually you end up in ECW. And I asked you the question, what was that like going from, because the WCW and WWF style back in the early 90s was so much different than what you did in ECW. How did you transition?
Easy. I mean, I knew that, wherever there's, wherever you have Paul Heyman directing and leading the product, it's going to be different than your mundane professional wrestling, So I expected it, and I thought it was great. And I thought it was great that not only did we have some incredible role models and veterans of professional wrestling that helped us out immensely. And that, of course, being Abdullah the Butcher, Don Morocco, Campatera, I believe he was there. The original Sheik. You had guys like Nikolai Volkov. You had Kevin Sullivan. Did I mention Stan Hansen? Terry Funk. So you had all this tremendous talent that have been there and done that, but mainly the focus was on the men and women that were not on that level.
Mm-hmm.
Because really had the chance, and at the time, let's face it, nobody was really banging down our door, to draw us into a bigger company. So we saw an opportunity. I saw an opportunity with ECW.
I saw you in WWF at the time, and then when I saw you again in ECW, it was because of tape trading, because ECW wasn't even, in a lot of markets back then.
No. I remember the very, very seasoned fans and fans that were very hardcore. They knew about ECW. As for the rest, they were like, I don't, are you like with WCW, you mean, or WWF? They never really heard of ECW. Of course, unless you were, from that area, the Philadelphia area.
I mean, even being from Albany, New York, which is 6-hour drive from Philadelphia, I'll be very honest with you, it was not on our radar at all. It just did not exist, because back then WWF never mentioned the competition on TV, so it wasn't as if we knew who you were. And even when your stars, it was funny back then when stars crossed over to different companies.
Yeah,
it was as if anything you did beforehand didn't matter, didn't exist. You had a new name, you had a new gimmick,
Yeah, exactly. None of that mattered, because that's how it was back then. And then, of course, you had the dirt sheets, and then people would get their hands on that, and that would kind of school them a little bit as far as what's going on. But there was no internet, and
No.
there was nothing like that. And a lot of it was word of mouth. And then, of course, a lot of the people would look at the product like ECW, and many loved it. A lot of them hated it. They said, this is absolute garbage. These guys are either too small, or they're this, or they're not that. And, they're, they can't wrestle because they have to go through tables and bleed and all that. They didn't realize that most of the talent are tremendous wrestlers. But again,
it wasn't what I was programmed to accept as wrestling. Therefore, that's I assume that's the stereotype you had felt.
We had to be different, because at any given moment you could tune in and watch the other two products. That obviously, the two giants of professional wrestling. I believe WA was gone by that time. And so you had the two. You had the NWA, WCW, you had World Wrestling Federation, and then anyone else, unless you could really bring it.
There just wasn't a third anymore.
No, you were just sand in the wind.
So you've been very fortunate, 40-year career. You've wrestled the who's who of wrestling, honestly. We went over just some of the names beforehand. What are you doing now? Where do you find yourself now? Do you think you could still go if you had to go? What are you where are you at with wrestling now?
Well, I have a professional wrestling training center school, Impact Wrestling Pro Wrestling Dojo, and that is in Vineland, New Jersey. And you can find us on social media, and we're running TV tapings. We're actually going to be running a TV taping. We ran our first one this past Saturday, and we're going to be running another one on Memorial Day.
Really? Now, are these localized? Are they pay-per-view? How are they being broadcast?
They're being taped for several TV markets, and we're working with some people, and it's right now it's pretty concrete, but it's still being worked on.
Who in your brand who in your brand excites you the most? Who do you have that you think might have it to get to the next level? Who would you want to plug if I was going to, let's say, hey, who are your stars?
Well, again, we just pretty much see. I had Assault Championship Wrestling 20 plus years ago, so this is 20 years later, 20 plus years later, and I'm still building roster. And our roster is going to be pretty strong. So, I mean, to start naming names. But let's just say that we have people on board like the Ironman Tommy Cairo. He's one of the trainers, one of the bookers. We have Angel Orsini, who was the Prodiget in ECW. We have Kid Cash on board.
That's exciting. He's a well-known name on the indie scene.
Absolutely. We already ran a show, and we featured Gary Wolf, Mikey Whipwreck, the Backseat Boys, Johnny Cashmere, Leatherface from Japan, Peter Be Beautiful, you name it. But we do have a lot of up-and-coming stars, and I will be showcasing them. And they're absolutely amazing. They work very, very hard. And if there's anything as close to the hard work of ECW that is being emulated, this is it.
How does it feel to go from performer to kind of, I guess you wear many hats over there, producer, booker, writer. How does it feel to be on the opposite end of things?
I'm still a performer. So
you said that. You did tell me that.
I mean, I still perform, with my own company when need be. However, I still take bookings, and, I'm still, and, not just signings. I still wrestle, and I still wrestle. I wrestle guys that are, some of them are over 40 years younger than I am, and it's,
it must be a gift for you to give back then, to go from that 20-year-old wrestling somebody like a Terry Funk or somebody who was that much older than you to be able to now impart that knowledge and that experience. That's got to be such a rewarding gift for you. Am I wrong?
It is, especially when you do meet some of the young talent that really gets it, and they show a lot of respect, and they want to learn the right way. They're willing to learn, they're willing to listen, and a lot of them that don't jump ahead of themselves, the know-it-alls. Because I mean, nowadays, the wrestling industry has changed so much, and unfortunately, not for the better.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, that's not the 100% of it.
Yeah.
A good amount has changed for the worse, and I mean much, much worse. But there's still groups out there, meaning promotions, promoters, trainers, wrestlers. There's still a lot of young talent that gets it, and they show respect, and they're trying to break in the right way, meaning being properly trained and being conditioned and listening and learning. So that's actually a breath of fresh air. Otherwise, if there wasn't any of that still available, I wouldn't have come back after taking like 10 or 12 years off that I did. Then I decided to come back because basically, I was seeing a lot of out there. But then again, I would see bright new stars on the horizon, but they were almost like lost in the shuffle of a lot of
Yeah.
the, and I sort of wanted to I felt like reaching out and saying, here, come over here, separate yourself from that, because that will get you nowhere. And that's pretty much what we're doing at our training center, at our dojo. Where you'd be surprised, how many young people out there that are being booked in these different promotions that are below professional. Yet they're good.
I've been there, seen a couple myself.
Yeah, they're good. They're talented. They just need to believe in themselves.
Yep.
And they need somebody to give them a chance. And basically, we're here for that. And thankfully, we're not the only ones. There's several other promotions. That feel the way that I do. And I'm always willing to work closely with them. And because we don't need to divide among each other. We just need to weed out the bad and the negative.
Yeah. So I think John's going to try to come back in here. On his way back in, is there anything else you want to say? When's the date of your next show? You said it's Memorial Day, correct?
Yes, and it's going to be in Vineland. It's going to be at our dojo, Impact Central Pro Wrestling Dojo.
Tickets on sale?
Tickets are on sale. Yes.
How can I get tickets?
Tickets? Call the dojo.
Call the dojo. Do you want to give a number?
I sure do. The number is 570-618-1234.
Jason, is there anything else you want to share with us tonight before you go, especially about Sabu and your experience? I know you've talked a lot about him, but I want to give you the respect, as someone who worked so closely with him for quite a while.
Ironically enough, the Memorial Day, we decided to do this show to tribute our the fallen, So of course, we're going to tribute Sabu on the show as well. And we're not the only ones. I'm sure every promotion out there, will have something for Sabu, as well as they should. But
yes,
we're going to do the same. And this show is dedicated, to the memory of Sabu, because he, I met him in 1993 and spent roughly 8 years working with him, and then we traveled to Japan together. We would see each other quite frequently, at different shows and different signings. And I was fortunate to see him last week at the 2300 Arena for the One and Done.
Yeah,
so that's unfortunate. The last time I saw him, and then we definitely want to tribute Sabu, and I really don't know what else to say. It's just very sad and shocking, but I would rather celebrate his life and his legacy and everything that he's done for this industry and for all of us.
We really appreciate your time, Jason. We appreciate you coming on. We would love to have you back anytime you got a show coming up, anytime you want to talk. It's been a true pleasure of mine to finally meet you and talk with you.
Thank you. And likewise.
Thank you very much. And I don't know how John's going to come back in. I messaged him to come in, and he's still waiting on him. There he is.
All right. I'm back. Jason, I caught a bit of the end of the interview. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be on with you for the entire interview. Unfortunately, internet had other plans for me. But like I said, Jeff kind of touched on it before. I appreciate it a lot. When it was announced that Sabu did pass away, I was like, I want to have somebody on who either worked with him to kind of give them the opportunity. And you were one of the first names I thought of. I definitely will be in contact with you because I definitely want to come down and check out the dojo.
Absolutely. Please do. Anytime. You're always
And
welcome.
absolutely, I will try to maybe work with you guys with the podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you
All
so
right, but
much.
absolutely, I'll definitely be in contact with you soon.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
You know, John, one thing that Jason talked about was, and he and I talked about before the show began, because you were off the air as well. You were having difficulties then, was just his growth and, you know, the traveling and like going from the mat wrestling that was of the late 70s, early 80s to that ECW style. And that toll that must have taken on the body. We talk about people like Sabu who went through chairs. We've got a lot of comments in the section that talk about the thrilling matches, the exciting matches, this match and that match. Unfortunately, we also talk about the ugly. You know, we mentioned the ugly last week, and there's been a lot of comments that come out about Sabu after the fact that, you know, he may have done this, he may have been on that. And I just, you know, there's a time and a place. And then I also feel that there's just no reason to disrespect the man after his death. The man gave his life literally to wrestling, to not only to the fans, but to everybody that he ever worked with. And, you know, I want to say to the people out there talking shit, part of my language, that, you know, give the guy his due, man. You know, guy would go through tables for you if you asked him to. You know, you paid $1 to watch him wrestle, he'd give you a 20-minute 5-star match. So,
Jeff, one thing with this show, not to take you off there for a second, but one thing with this show is you don't have to apologize about, you know, saying shit or anything like that. Because one thing I have pushed for this show since day one is for it to be as real and authentic. Yes, you know, F-bomb, that's one thing. But other stuff, I'm just giving you that. No, but the thing is, as far as with Sabu, and we'll move on to, you know, some other stuff as well, because we have some other stuff to get to tonight. You remember the movie The Wrestler?
Yeah, one of my favorite movies of all time. Legitimately one of my favorite movies of all time. Marissa Tomei stars in it, and you get to see her naked. Oh, wait a minute. The other part of it, yeah.
What I was just gonna say, remember how in The Wrestler he kind of went out on his own, doing what he loved to do?
Yeah.
So I just kind of looked at it while I was sitting backstage, and the reason I was sitting backstage for a while, because I was like, you know what, I want to let you get your moment in. I want to kind of let you have that moment of, you know, doing an interview, but it's just very apropos that on the same episode we have Evan Ginzburg coming on. We have Evan coming on at about 9:15, who was an associate producer of The Wrestler. It's just very ironic that we're talking about the passing of Sabu the way he did on the same episode where we're going to have one of the guys who made, I would say, one of the best wrestling movies out there, or was a part of making one of the best wrestling movies out there.
I'd actually, to be honest with you, John, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a wrestling fan, I'd argue that The Wrestler is one of the best movies of all time. Mickey Rourke that was probably his best performance of his entire career. Obviously, Marissa Tomei, I'm in love with, but she played such a pivotal role in that. And then you had all the backup wrestlers that were in that movie that they saw, you know, the parallels between Ricky the Ram or Robbie the Ram Robinson and then some of their counterparts, the real life counterparts, you know, what they would have to go through with the drugs and the loss, you know, the fall from grace, you know, the fall from fame. You know, I remember reading an article that said Roddy Piper cried over it. because it reminded him so much of a lot of the people he worked with over the years.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. But guys, like I said, Evan Ginzburg will be on with us in about 15 minutes. So normally I know we do commercials and everything, but because of all the internet issues we had tonight, we're just gonna go straight through with everything. What was I gonna say? We do have, I can announce now, we will have a guest coming up next week on the show, because I want to talk a little bit of indie wrestling just to kind of break it up a little bit here, Jeff.
Yep.
Anthony Cole from Breed Combination, the company down in Jersey that I keep talking about, will be on with us next week because they have a show coming up, Anniversary 8. It's in memory of, do you remember a couple weeks ago we lost Vince Steele?
Yep, I missed that show because of my car accident.
Yeah.
But yep, we
So what they're doing is them and Shadow Wrestling are doing a collaborative show, and it's the 8th anniversary. So Anthony Cole will be on, and also I can confirm there will be a major announcement.
Ooh. I'm not being replaced, am I?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
No, you're not being replaced. I'll just put it to you this way. It's an announcement about when their next show is going to be.
Great.
It won't be leaked on Facebook, and it won't be leaked on the dirt sheets or anything like that. The only place you'll be able to find out when Breed Combination's next show is, you have to tune into our show. But not only that, you have another announcement to make. There's a company down here in Jersey, in Long Island, called Championship Entertainment Wrestling. They do a lot of stuff with the NWA. Obviously, we know the NWA has the Crocket Cup coming up this weekend.
Yeah.
Their owner is a guy by the name of Joe Ocasio, the Landmine. If you've seen NWA, you've seen him in action before.
Mm-hmm.
We have an announcement coming up because they do a lot of shows on Long Island, literally like 5 minutes away from where I live. So I have been talking with Joe, and tomorrow, Jeff, if you are free, you're more than welcome to join. I don't know what time yet the announcement's going to be made, but we will have Joe on here for a special announcement.
I probably won't be able to make it tomorrow as my day down in Albany, but I cannot wait to hear the announcement.
Yes, it's going to be a lot of fun. And also, do want to also make a mention, Dynasty. Obviously, we talked about it last week extensively. Did you get a chance, by the way, to see Chris Envy's backstage interview? He did.
No, I didn't see that.
He did. I saw it a couple days ago, and I wanted to bring this up to you. He's a little heated. Now, I don't know if it's storyline heated or he's heated, because he turned around and said, I don't know who the backstage interviewer now is for Dynasty, because I know it was Billy at one point, but I know now she's upgraded to being the Bobby the Brain Heenan. I don't know the lady's name now.
Okay, so I saw the link. I didn't watch the interview.
Well, he basically turned around and said that it's not over yet between him and Fox. After we know what Fox said, and he basically turned around and said, you can bring up everything about me, I don't care, but the second you bring up my wife, that's when it gets real. And you saw that look in his face. Once Dynasty comes back, no, go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead.
I would say once Dynasty comes back, because they did announce that their show in Light Up the Sky, unfortunately, is going to be postponed due to everything going on medically right now. I have a feeling that Fox is going to have hell to pay.
Yeah, I did want to touch on that briefly. You know that Chris unfortunately had to postpone the show, the June 21st show. Unfortunately, it coincides with one of Ashley, his wife's treatments. Kind of breaking the fourth wall here, going a little bit, behind the curtain, pulling the curtain back. But as everyone is aware by now, Ashley Miller, his loving wife, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. So she's going to start undergoing treatment any day now. And so all of our friends, all of our fans, if we could just wish her the best. There is a GoFundMe online that you can find on her profile as well as Chris's profile to help with, the expenses. They have 2 lovely children. Obviously, Mav. It's heartbreaking, what they're going through right now.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely want to bring that up. Also want to bring up one other thing in regards to independent wrestling. Immortal Championship Wrestling had their latest show this past weekend called Road to Immortality, which is their yearly show they do up in Rome. Don't know yet if Brother Jonas was able to survive after what happened with Dynasty a few days beforehand and then doing the Rumble. But I did see the clip. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there. But we do have a new World Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah.
As Garrett Holiday is now your new ICW Heavyweight Champion.
Repeat.
Yep.
The Brother Jonas spot with the tables, the easiest way I can compare it to, a couple years ago, Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon had a match where Kurt was supposed to throw Shane through glass, but somebody didn't put the sugar glass in. They put real glass in by mistake. And Shane went neck first into the glass, and it looked like he died. And he got up and said to Kurt, do it again. And Kurt threw him, and this time he went through. That's probably about as close as I could describe Brother Jonas going not going through the table.
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. So also I know there's a new women's champion.
Yep.
In Immortal. Masha Samovich defeated Christina Marie to become the new Immortal Women's Champion. So congratulations to Masha. I know Immortal has a show coming up May 31st called Immortal 2K25, I think. In
Johnstown, New York, yeah.
Yes. So be very curious to see how that plays out. As far as, other stuff, just round that with the indies for a second. We did find out also since our last show, the 2 new inductees into the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
I was just pulling that up right now myself.
Yeah, but what's funny, Jeff, and I get what you're doing. I'm doing all this off memory.
Well, I wanted to make sure that I got dates and times right. My brain's a little fried.
You see that?
We have 3. We have 3 inductees. Okay,
yes.
A singles and a tag team. So for singles, we have Trish Stratus, who I can think of no bigger name in women's wrestling other than, let me say, post-1990 era. I can think of no bigger name.
No, I can't really, because I'm even trying to think of other ones, and I'm like, no, Trish kind of supersedes all of them.
And I'll tell you what makes that so impressive. Trish was part of that Divas era, that bra and panties match era, wrestling era, and she's part of the modern era who can still go.
Yes. If I remember correctly, weren't her and Lita the first women to main event Monday Night Raw?
They were. And it was quite a show then. It really was. Because those 2 performers were amazing.
Yeah.
On the tag team side of things, we finally, we have Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson, Rocky Maivia, Dwayne The Rock's father.
Yes.
They were a tag team back in the 70s. I believe they were the first African-American tag team champions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
They were revolutionary in what they did. Tony Atlas still looks like he could out wrestle half the roster.
Just hopefully it's not a foot match, because then it could turn weird.
I'll tell you, anytime you see that guy on TV, you know he's gonna tell it like it is.
Mm-hmm. But guys, again, the 2025 induction class for the Hall of Fame, for the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, goes down Columbus Day weekend. And
in my hometown of Albany, New York.
I will definitely am planning to be up there again for that one. I missed last year's. And there is a possibility, I'm not going to say anything is definite, if I can pull some strings, I might be able to bring on some people from the Hall of Fame to talk about it, like maybe Seth Turner, who's the president, possibly some other people.
Well, yeah, let's do the best we can, you know.
Absolutely. But I know we still got enough time for that, so I'm not like running around like, okay, we have to do this like next week. We have a bit of time. What else?
We have a few minutes to kill here. I just want to point out some comments. Merc, just everyone talking about Sabu and just how they feel. I mentioned this in the interview that as fans, it's hard for us maybe to relate to the wrestlers when they lose a coworker, somebody they work with, somebody that they perform with, but we feel that pain on a different level as well.
Yes.
And you see that in some of the comments too. And then you also see a lot of people asking where you were.
Yeah, unfortunately, like I said, internet decided. Unfortunately, the internet doesn't realize that from 8 to 10, it's Around the Ropes podcast time. And decided,
it also happens to be one of the most popular times to be on the internet, especially in a busy area like where you live down by the city. Yeah. Kids getting homework done, a lot of people doing work,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because kids are definitely doing homework. Yeah.
Hey, look, it ain't happening up here in Plattsburgh. We don't have that many people up here.
I know for once. I would say for once, usually it's the other way around with the internet.
Well, I figured it out. So I have an old laptop. I'm not a computer guy, and I figured I told you before, if I have 3 screens open at the same time, my internet just stops working. Yeah. So when you see me grabbing my phone, it's to check notes. It's to check the things I'm writing to John, because we're communicating behind the scenes as well. So,
but I look at it this way. I have a new laptop. I just bought a new laptop not even a month ago. And I do the show downstairs in the basement. And I don't know if it's the fact of surrounded by stuff that if you're a sports fan, you would like have a field day down here, which not even just sports fans, just political stuff also.
Well, I mean, I'm a huge Disney fan, and I don't know if anybody can see, but I got my Disney collection behind me, some of it.
Hold on. We have a few minutes here. If I can somehow do it, because like I'm surrounded by, I would say, years of history of like political stuff. Like I'll give a great example. I know we're getting off the topic here, and I know we have some other stuff wrestling wise to get to, but one thing I want to bring up is the one piece of, now mind you, all the stuff that is down here is my dad's. One thing he has a Pearl Harbor newspaper from when Pearl Harbor got attacked on December 7th, 1941.
Believe it or not, I actually have one of them as well. My dad saved a lot of newspapers for me from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. I'm sure I'm sure if you and I went through our collections, we probably have a lot of the same clippings.
Absolutely. But I know just a lot of stuff down here. I just sit down here so many times and I'm like, this stuff, it amazes me how much history. And I did a show years ago where my dad was a guest and we actually did an entire tour of it. But enough about the political stuff, because obviously this is a political show. This is a pro wrestling show. And it's time to bring on our next guest. Guys, this is a guest who I have been looking forward to just to pick his brains on everything going on right now. And I want to give him the proper introduction now that my internet's finally working. Guys, our next guest is one of the associate producers of 350 Days and The Wrestler. He's also an accomplished author. Guys, welcome to the show, the one, the only, my internet work would be great, Mr. Evan Ginzburg. Evan, how you doing this evening?
How are you? Good.
Doing well. Evan, before we get into obviously the movie, because myself and Jeff, we were talking about the Wrestler beforehand. What got you into being a pro wrestling fan at first?
I was a bored kid on a 1972 rainy afternoon, and this was pre-internet, pre-video games, pre-cell phones, pre-everything, primitive times, and I was just bored, and my mom comes over and she starts fiddling with the UHF dial, the mysterious UHF dial. And there's PBS stuff, and I'm a kid. I don't really appreciate it yet. And there's a lot of foreign language channels. And all of a sudden, I see this massive guy pounding on this American Indian. And I'm like, what's this? And my mom goes, it's pro wrestling. I used to go with Grandpa to the Eastern Parkway Arena in Brooklyn, New York. And I saw Buddy, she's telling me she saw Buddy Rogers and Killer Kowalski and, et cetera, so on. Rocca, she loved Antonina Rocca, climbing the ropes, walking the ropes. And I'm watching this and my eyes are like popping out of my head. And, I'm a kid, I'm a total mark. And all of a sudden, Strongbow makes this herky-jerky war dance and he's chopping down the guy who was pounding on him and pins the guy. And to me, it's like Marvel superheroes and villains. And I watched the rest of the show and, it was amazing. And I made a mental note of when it was on and I started watching every week. And because it was on UHF, I discovered, Championship Wrestling from Florida, hosted by Gordon Soley, and the LA tapings with John Tolos and Victor Rivera and the Hollywood Blondes, Gordman and Goliath, etc., so on. And I just became a huge wrestling fan.
Hey, Evan, Jeff here. Nice to meet you, sir.
Same here.
I want the fans, I want the audience to know, John, Evan, and I are all from the same state, believe it or not. We sound completely different. Evan being from Brooklyn, and you can hear that accent.
Oh, yeah.
John from outside of Queens, and you can hear that accent. And I'm from New York. I'm from upstate New York. So I don't have an accent.
Right. Right.
So, Evan, you mentioned names that my father and brothers got to see as well. The passion that they brought to my family translated down to me and got me into wrestling and got me to become such a huge wrestling fan as well. You mentioned names that were so big in New York City that they built the wrestling industry to what it is today. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when Triple H and Vince McMahon do the spin, Vince took it out of bingo halls and VFW halls. I used to see Bruno and Billy Graham wrestle in front of 22,000 people in a snowstorm, no less. And closed circuit in the adjoining Felt Forum was sold out as well. So you're looking at over 25,000 people, and up and down the East Coast, Boston Garden, Philadelphia Spectrum, etc., so on. I mean, it was a huge, huge business. Vince took it worldwide, and etc. So Vince Jr. But to say it just came out of VFW and bingo halls is absurd. And it was big time, big money even back then. And Bruno was champion over 7 years, the first reign, 3.5 the second. He wasn't champ for over 10 years because he wasn't drawing money. So.
Yeah, well, and New York back then, being very Italian as it was, they had to have their Italian hero. And that's how Bruno, he went over for 10 years.
Well, it was very ethnic, the wrestling that they presented, because it was a blue collar, audience. And there was Pedro Morales and Victor Rivera, the Puerto Rican champions, and Ivan Putski, the Polish strongman, and Bruno, the Italian Superman, and later Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, the first African-American champions.
We just mentioned that, yeah.
Yeah, and every Irish wrestler, his name started with Irish. Irish Davey O'Hannon, Irish Pat Barrett. They knew their audience.
It's funny because that translates to even today. The ethnic wrestling. I tell my wife, who's a new wrestling fan all the time, what you're watching now is nothing new. This has been going on 50, 60 years. You take a wrestler like Gunther nowadays, he's just Hans Schmidt from the 1960s and 1950s and 60s. Who I'm talking about.
What people don't realize is when I was going with my dad in the 70s, a lot of that audience were World War II veterans, who fought the Nazis in World War II. So there you have Hans Schroeder and Otto von Heller and Waldo von Erich and Baron von Raschke all coming into Madison Square Garden. And, and we were a mock audience. There was no, internet, or even the sheets were primitive and they weren't exposing the business in the 70s. And, we believe. So you have this monstrous Waldo von Erich, stomping on Bruno, and we're feeling every kick and punch. And it was it was electric, Madison Square Garden, that era, because, you felt it when a Bruno Sammartino and Ivan Koloff would walk down the aisle at the Garden, no pyro, no entrance music, just two guys in a pair of tights. The building would shake. Billy Graham, you see the kids today, they don't really understand. They'll go, oh, these guys weren't great wrestlers. They just punched and kicked. The charisma was off the charts. And
yeah, they say, they say, The Rock is just a modern Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was just a modern Billy Graham.
Oh, yeah.
And
Billy Graham was a real originator, and, got Hogan, Austin Idol, so many guys basically took his shtick, and, and Jesse Ventura, of course, and some of them will admit it. And Billy Graham should have been a multi-millionaire. The business didn't do good by him. So I'm sure that you get this question 100 times, a million times. You write the wrestler, you go in, you help out, you work on that. Who's that based on? Where's that come from? Oh, it was a composite. Darren Aronofsky and Scott Franklin, the executive producer, that's the money guy, the guy who made the business deals. I was an associate producer. I was the wrestling guy. I brought in Ron Killings and Romeo Roselli and Necro Baker. I did 5 or 6 casting calls. I brought in Mickey's stunt double. I brought in Offer ended up training him. the ring, etc. So on. I was basically in charge of the wrestling end of it. These guys were mid-'80s Hulkamania, rock and wrestling era fans, and it was a composite. But people don't realize that the guy that Mickey spent a lot of time with before we filmed it was Greg Valentine. And you could see some Greg Valentine in Randy the Ram. You know?
I believe that Greg could go in the ring. Greg could go, and he could
Greg
work with
Valentine was
anybody.
amazing.
He could go face, he could go heel, he could do whatever you asked of him. I must have seen Greg Valentine wrestle at least a dozen times because he was on every house show card that came to Albany, New York. You know, and they could put him at the opening match. They could put him in the headline match. They could put him anywhere they wanted.
Greg and Backlund was odd, and Greg and Tito was odd for the IC belt. I mean, Prime Greg was amazing. I saw him headline the Garden many times. I saw him wrestle Backlund. I saw him wrestle Hogan at the Garden and Tito. He headlined again and again and again. And he's actually almost underrated. I think he hung in there a little too long, like Flair, where the star diminishes a bit. But you saw Prime Valentine, late 70s, early to mid 80s. The guy was amazing.
You see a parallel with how people like Greg Valentine and some of the other wrestlers hung on too long, and then the Ram Robinson hang on too long.
Well,
Greg's
a friend, and Greg is not broke or anything like Randy the Ram. But there were plenty of guys in wrestling who died needing GoFundMes, who needed a GoFundMe to save their house, pay their hospital bills, to get buried. Sadly, a lot of these guys. Yeah. It's disgraceful that $1 billion corporation allows this. Just, you know, for the bad publicity that these were guys you had on the road 300 plus days a year, and you didn't take care of them with the the whole independent contractor deal, which only benefits the corporation. These guys deserve better. And Jim Cornette, who I'm a big fan of, I love the Midnight Express, probably my all-time favorite tag team. Cornette said, "We don't all end up in trailer parks." You know, he wasn't wild about the wrestler. And, you know, my response to that is, we were telling one story. And if you follow Aronofsky's work, everything leans dark. This is not a rom-com guy. Yeah. You know, Aronofsky in Requiem for a Dream, the housewife is going out of her mind on, all kinds of pills, and the refrigerator is chasing her around, the apartment. This guy, he's not going to tell a happy story where, the guy retires with $5 million in the bank and lives a life of leisure. That's not a story. Randy the Ram was a tragic story.
But it was a real story because we had these wrestlers come out that we viewed as gods. The way you were just talking about some of your heroes growing up. And we forget that they were real men and women with real lives, real debts, real bills to pay. And a lot of them, worked not because they really maybe wanted to, but because they had to.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them hung on because they had to.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. I mean, even Sabu was wrestling a few weeks ago, and, it was kind of ugly. And what Ric Flair's last match, when he was 72 or 3 or whatnot, that was like Requiem for a heavyweight. It was pitiful. And he's lucky he didn't die in there. And it was hard to even watch that. And, some of these guys don't go out on top, unfortunately. And some of these guys end up pushing a broom. They main event in Madison Square Garden. They end up, they're a bouncer at a rock club or a strip club or whatnot. And it's not always glamorous. And also there's the other side. Nikolai was a dear friend. He had a farm and he saved his money. Bret Hart, we've worked with. He ended up quite well. I mean, financially, so it's not a blanket statement. And since we're on that subject, I just hate when the fans do the cliche. They all pissed away fortunes on wine, women, and song. Absolutely not true. Johnny Valiant was a dear friend. He never broke $100,000 in wrestling. Never broke.
No, and there's a very famous story. Owen Hart saved every penny he ever made. He was 2 years away from retiring, and he was only in his early 30s. They said he was 2 to 3 years away from retiring and being a fireman. Can you imagine the world without an Owen Hart from retirement, much less death?
Well, that was really one of the most horrific tragedies ever, and absolutely unnecessary and disgraceful that they continued the card after he had fallen. Nicole Bass was a dear friend of mine, and I actually booked her as an agent, and she was in the next match, and she said to me, they wheeled Owen past me. He was blue. I knew he was gone. I was sobbing hysterically, and the powers that be backstage are pressuring her. The show must go on. The show must go on. She said, I wrestled in a fog.
Well,
go ahead, John. John, I've kind of hijacked your interview. I'm so sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
Evan, I know you were just recently at the Mecca for Brie Combination, actually, a couple weeks ago.
I wasn't there. I booked Tommy Rich in there. Tommy Rich cut a promo and was selling his merch, and he's sitting there, and middle of the show, Vince Steele collapses in ring and dies.
Yeah.
And Tommy, who's a good guy, sensitive, warm guy, lovable guy. That's not shtick. He fan friendly. I like him a lot personally. He said to me, I'm in the business 50 years. I never saw anybody die in the ring in front of me. And he was really shook up, and everybody there was shook up. The reason I wasn't there was because Jimmy Valiant was doing a signing in Queens, and I hadn't seen him in years, and he's a very close friend, and he's in his 80s. And, with wrestlers, they're not known for longevity. I'm like, let me go see him. You don't know if this could be one of the last opportunities. So I went to visit Jimmy that day, and pretty much the same time, Vince Steele died in the ring, 39 years old. So with 3 kids, he was a Facebook friend. I didn't know him well. I mean, I won't exaggerate, but everybody felt terrible, and they did a GoFundMe. They raised $18,000. So the wrestling community got behind it. But wrestling, people don't realize just how dangerous and deadly it could be. I mean, Misawa, lots of guys have died in the ring. Bruno wrestled somebody at Sunnyside Gardens, and the guy died. I mean, they have heart attacks. A lot of these guys.
Bruno broke his neck in the ring, and 3 weeks later, he's back.
I was at that match. I was at that match at the Garden. Stan Hansen clocks him. Bruno goes down, and you knew something was wrong because he just didn't get upright, and you could see he was in pain. You just knew something was terribly wrong, and so Bruno's neck is legitimately broken. It's not an angle, and Vince Sr. is rushing him to get back in the ring. Before you know it. And, these guys were treated like cattle, a lot of them. And now Vince Sr. has a better reputation than Vince Jr., but he didn't spread the money around either. And
I think it's a lot different now that we see Triple H running things. I think it's a lot more wrestler friendly. I see,
it's wrestler friendly, but the all-encompassing greed with the ticket prices and the money grabs, you have one parent after another online saying, I hate to tell my kid I can't take you anymore. I can't afford it. The last Garden House show was $63 to $1,010 ringside, 63 in the nosebleeds.
So my wife and I went to Royal Rumble last year. We got day of tickets. We were in the very last row of the very top of the Tampa Dome. You could not get farther away from the ring. And we paid almost $200 after fees and tickets, and all this stuff. And the tickets were advertised for $48 or $60 each. And I was like, oh, we'll go. And then, you add in all the fees and everything. And that was just for nosebleed tickets. And John and I talked briefly on Facebook Messenger this week that, we both feel that part of the reason WrestleMania was so muted, the viewership or the crowd, was because it's not your everyday wrestling fan like you, Evan, or me, or John. It's your big corporate sponsorships now.
We had at WrestleMania, they had people on top in the nosebleeds. They couldn't see the ring. It was so far away. Some of them couldn't see the screen. For $400 a ticket, they were watching the show on their cell phones. To me, it's absurd. It's like a religious pilgrimage. It's like a religious fervor. I have to be there. No, not for $400 to watch on your cell phone, miles away. I think it's disgraceful, the prices they charge today. And back in the day, it was a blue collar. It was $3 to $6 at the Garden. And one night, the ring announcer makes this sad announcement that they're raising the tickets to $7 the following month. And the place let out a collective groan because these were blue collar guys. My dad was a taxi driver. He never broke 25 grand. That $1 meant something. So, it's just sheer greed today. And another thing, the Garden was 12, 13, 14 times a year. Usually it was once a month on a Monday. And when it was really hot, like Pat Patterson and Backlund had 4 main events, they had 2 shows that July. So sometimes they would do 13 or 14 cards a year. Now it's 3 or 4 or 5 shows a year because now it's a graduation present, a birthday present, a Christmas present. They run December 26th. At the Garden, because you're looking at a $500 night easy.
And don't forget either, Evan, you talk about running the Garden every Monday night. They'd also be up in Albany, or if they weren't in Albany, they'd be over in Buffalo, or they'd be, over in Connecticut or up in Maine, running 2 shows a night. So your Garden show would be the A show. We'd get the B show, and even then the tickets were $3, $4 at the Armory.
We used to go to Madison Square Garden, Nassau Coliseum, Westchester County Center, Sunnyside Gardens. We go to 3-4 shows a month. It was dirt cheap. Yeah. You're sitting on top of the action. You're meeting the wrestlers. I mean, you're getting autographs. It was a different business. Now, line up like cattle. You have 30 seconds. You could pay hundreds of bucks to a WWE superstar. And don't you dare approach them outside of the ring because then you're a stalker. It's a bit much, the corporate, greed that's come into it. And, of course, don't wait for wrestlers 4 a.m., at the airport and don't sit in front of their house or whatnot. They are stalking, but that's a different story.
Yeah,
but
it is.
Just want to bring up one thing here. Talking about ticket prices, this is why the one thing I've pushed for, Evan, I've been doing this show now. The show has been up now since November of 2021, so for the last 3 years.
Congrats.
I have been pushing on this show. Thank you. If you can't go to a WWE show because you don't want to pay an arm and a leg, go to an independent show. An independent show, you're not paying the most you're paying. I mean, granted, yes, in the position I'm in, a lot of times I don't have to pay, but a lot of times I still feel like I do have to pay. The most you're paying is maybe $40. And that's still for a decent seat. You get to meet the wrestlers after. And a lot of times, if you go back to that company over and over again, you tend to build a friendship with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, John, we're going to talk about that offline there for a minute. I got a bone to pick with you about that. But we went to an independent show last weekend. I think the tickets were $25 each. So very affordable, very, and worth it. And like you just said, we got to meet the wrestlers, talk to them, take pictures, get, interact with them the way that the way that you were just talking about, Evan.
I say support indie everything. Indie film, indie theater, indie music, indie comics, indie publishing, whatever it is. I mean, some billion-dollar corporation doesn't need and doesn't necessarily even appreciate the support. You walk into your local indie and then, hey, there's John, there's Jeffrey. They're good guys. They're always supporting us. They're always promoting us. And they sincerely appreciate it. And it's like a little family, and you're meeting the stars of tomorrow. I was telling somebody this week after Sabu died, many, many, many years ago, I'm sitting at this New Jersey indie. Who's in the opening match? Sabu against Chris Candido. Nobody knew them. And there's Tammy sitting with them. Okay. And I'm talking to them. They're kids. And fresh faced, new to the business. I couldn't even, this so long ago, it had to be 30 years ago or more, that I couldn't even tell you, which promotion it was. It's just a local New Jersey indie, and they happen to be there, and stars in their eyes, the beginning of their career, and the good, the bad, and ugly that came of it to those three, unbelievable. You could do a movie right there. Those three, what they went through. Oh man.
Well, they did. They did. Vice did the Chris Candido and Tammy Stitch.
Yeah, I'm saying you could do a full length documentary or movie on, the roads those three took. Sabu was living with Melissa Coates. She was a close friend of mine. She was at my wedding. I have a piece on her in my book. And it's tough out there, the indies. You get in the car, you drive far away, you hope the promoter pays you what they promised you. As an agent, there were times I, mild-mannered school teacher at the time, and agent, stood my ground, pay us what you promised us. And I'm booking legends that they're trying to stiff or shortchange, and you just stand your ground, and then you never get booked by them again, because somehow this turns into you're the bad guy because the minuscule amount of money they wrestled for, you're saying pay us what you promised us after you drove for hours to and from, there's a good, bad, and ugly to this business, boy. I've met wonderful, wonderful people, some of my closest friends, and I've met people I wouldn't piss on if they were on fire.
It's funny, John, you talked about the ICW, being in Rome and Johnstown. You forget these towns are hours apart. So ICW, the independent, I'd say more central leather stocking area of New York, they run shows hours apart from each other, and that's just one small company. And we have 4 or 5 of them in the area that are all running. So we certainly understand, Evan.
But just to bring up the other thing with the independent stuff, I mean, you look at it from that perspective. You have a place like upstate New York where they could have a show that could be 3 hours away from another show, or you can be like with me, where one of the buildings I go to is the Mecca in Ridgefield Park. And it seems like for a while, I mean, they haven't done it now, but it seems like for a while, every company is almost running out of that building. And I mean, you want to talk about, and I mean, the comment's always been oversaturation. I mean, you go to like where Jeff is in upstate New York, there's maybe
nothing
companies.
I got nothing. I got Montreal.
But yet you come down to like the Jersey area, especially the Mecca. You have at least, and I mean, I can sit here and rattle off half of them. But it's like every other weekend, it's, well, this company's running here, and this company's running here, and this company's running here. But I still say it, though. If you have the opportunity, go to an independent show.
Oh, yeah. I love indies. I still go to indies. And I'm not one of these guys, there's been no good wrestling since the territories. I see right behind John, you got the All In poster. I love MJF and Swerve and Osprey and Tony Storm. I think they're tremendous. And I've been to a bunch of AEW cards, and I think Osprey's best in the world. And, you know, I think today you have to treat wrestling like a smorgasbord. I mean, I generally don't like WWE's product, but I do like, on the right night, Cody and Gunther and Roman Reigns when he has his working boots on, and Fatu's awesome. I mean, they have some great wrestlers. It's just, you know, I don't really need a 20-minute entrance and sing along.
I get it.
It is much different. It is.
Yeah.
Evan, I want to get your take, though. I know, you were a part of The Wrestler. I got your take on another wrestling movie that just came out recently. Not recently, but within the last year or so. The Iron Claw, the Von Erich movie.
Okay. To me, it was an interesting experience watching that as an old school fan. One, I was a little too close to the subject, so I'm going, that guy kind of looks like Bruiser Brody. And this guy, isn't really, getting Ric Flair exactly, he's a little off. And, I think the average person, the average film goer would have enjoyed it more than a quote unquote hardcore, longtime wrestling fan. Plus, I knew everything that was going to happen because I knew the whole Von Erich story, and which isn't really fair to it. It was a quality film. I mean, the scene where Kerry's dead body is carried and put on the table, it's devastating. The scene where the mother says, I wear this black dress to all my kids' funerals. I'm paraphrasing. That was devastating. I mean, it's a quality film. It's just, you're too close to it in a sense. And what I also found very disconcerting is the actors that played the Von Erichs, the bodies weren't right. Kevin was too muscular, and Kerry was too short. It just, I'm sitting there, and it was the suspension of disbelief was difficult because I was going in and out like, that doesn't look like Kerry, throughout the movie. So, which is not, again, as a filmmaker, it's not really fair to the filmmaker because, like I said, somebody who came in cold, didn't know the Von Erich story, I think they would have really enjoyed it more than we would because it would have been just shocking, one death after another. And even spinning that Kevin had a, happy, he's with his family, and it was a tough spin because he lost all of his brothers. It was depressing.
John, you're just a few years younger than me. I was at that age when those brothers started to die. It broke me. It broke wrestling. It broke a lot of us, especially for me when Kerry died. Because watching him 1990 SummerSlam was one of my first pay-per-views, and he beats Mr. Perfect for the IC championship. I didn't get to see him beat Ric Flair, but I went back and watched it. And when Kerry died, I mean, I still have a hard time talking about that. So and then learning about all of his brothers, that was life-changing as a wrestling fan, right,
It's
Evan?
Shakespearean tragedy. With the exception of Kevin, they all died. And Fritz and his wife died eventually. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not a happy story by any stretch of the imagination. And had they not been in wrestling, I don't think they would have fared as badly. You know,
I'll say this much. I'm towards the younger. I grew up mainly in the like Attitude Era, and then Ruthless Aggression, and then obviously where we are now. And I'm very big in being like that wrestling historian. Almost like I always try to go back and watch the older stuff, like before WWE put everything on Peacock and they had the network. I remember watching Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes back in the old NWA days.
yeah.
And you turn around to somebody my age now and you say to them, oh, go watch Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes. They look at you and go, who?
Yeah,
but like, to me, it's like
Cody's dad and what?
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, but to me, it's like I'm very big in the old school. And the one rivalry that I wish I got to see live, and I got to see it now later on, is the Von Erichs and the Freebirds.
Yeah, I saw the Freebirds live several times in the New York area when we had Pro Wrestling USA, Freebirds against Road Warriors, and I even saw Freebirds in WWF. They were there briefly, but I didn't. I unless you were living in Texas, you weren't seeing a lot of the Freebirds live. I saw Michael Hayes on a Jersey Indie headlining. Yeah, I mean, the Freebirds were huge. They were great. And I mean, the Terry Gordy story's a tragedy too. I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
A lot of tragic stories from that era. And again, we keep going back to the wrestler, being kind of the epitome of that story and of the tragedy from the wrestlers of that era. And I just looked it up to verify the wrestler. It came out in 2018. Your movie's old enough. 2008. Yes, you're right. 2008. Your movie's old enough to have had its own John Cena career. It's been around and it still holds up. It still has fans. We still have people commenting in our chat room here that it's one of their favorite movies of all time. That how good Mickey Rourke was.
I tell people that Mickey's performance, when he does the scene where he says to his daughter, "I'm just a broken down piece of meat," that's Marlon Brando and On the Waterfront saying, "I could have been a contender."
Mm-hmm.
That was 75 or so years ago. It's going to be eternal because that's how great his performance was. And
when he's on top of the ropes at the end and he apologizes and he's got tears in his eyes, I lost it. I'm a grown man. I'm a wrestling fan my whole life. I started crying like a little baby when he jumps off the top and then it goes to black.
We were at the New York Film Festival, one of the most prestigious film festivals in the world, Lincoln Center, Manhattan. 2,300 people, $40 a ticket, sold out. I'm sitting there with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I look around during the scene with Mickey and his daughter when he says, "I'm just a broken down piece of meat." Everybody around us is crying. And I said to myself, we had spent 7 years off and on working on this, funding meetings, casting, going on the road so Aronofsky would get the wrestling part of it right. We were out every weekend for 6 months. I was taking them to wrestling events. We went to CZW, Cage of Death. We were backstage. They're sewing these guys up like a MASH unit. I mean, and
we see that. We see that in the movie.
Oh yeah.
We see that.
Everywhere we went inspired something in the movie. I took Darren and Scott Franklin, the money guy, the executive producer, and the screenwriter, Rob Siegel, and other guys from the crew to a convention in New Jersey. And It was grim. It was like the WWE Hall of Fame practically. You had Tony Atlas, Nikolai, Sheik, Albano, Johnny Valiant, Moolah, Mae Young, Samoans, and there was nobody there. There were more wrestlers and vendors than fans. It was grim to the point Iron Sheik's head was down on the table sleeping. That's how bad it was. And I was going through the script, making sure the wrestling content was authentic. I wasn't writing it. I was saying to the writer, this rings true, this doesn't, etc. So next thing I know, that scene was added to the script, that tragic autograph scene, because we experienced it. While we were there, Aronofsky kept going, Evan, where is everybody? Like he felt sad for these guys, like, after the glory. And I said, Darren, it's like this sometimes. It's not always glamorous. And that autograph scene, that was real, boy, because we lived it. We saw it with our own eyes. And while they were actually shooting that scene, I was on set, and I said to Darren, the tables look too antiseptic. It's too neat and tidy. It wouldn't look like this. It would look more like a flea market, Everybody's looking through the stuff, and it's more messy, and every inch of the table is covered. So I'm sitting there actually doing some set design, and next thing I know, Aronofsky gets this smirk, and he goes, Evan, come here. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I want you to talk to all the wrestlers in the scene, walk up to Mickey last, ask him for an autograph and a Polaroid. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not an actor, I'm there in street clothes, no makeup, nothing. So Mickey whispers in my ear. He goes, just improv it. Like very casual, just improv it. Like I'm acting my whole life. I never even acted in high school.
Yeah, just go with it.
Yeah. So you got 125 people there, giant cameras in my face. So the whole time, I'm thinking, what am I going to say to him? Because we're improvising. So I get up to him and I go, I loved you as a kid. I saw you at Madison Square Garden. Can I have your autograph? And he looks at me and he's improvising it. And he goes, what's your name? And now I'm improvising it. I go, Evan. So how surreal this is. I'm playing myself in a fictional movie. Utterly surreal. So, a buddy of mine said to me, that was Aronofsky's gift to you. That's a little piece of forever. That movie's going to be seen forever. Not because it's the greatest movie ever made, but it was as great a lead performance as you're ever going to see. Heart-wrenching.
It is a great movie. It is.
I said to Mickey one night, we went to various screenings, all over the place. I said, what did you think of the movie? And he says to me, quote, I can't watch it. It reminds me of my life. Because he was top box office.
Yep. He was number one in the 80s.
He was like a tortured artist.
Yep.
And he goes to box. He's getting punched in the face. Yep. A sex symbol. Actors don't do this. This is not a normal career trajectory.
He was the biggest star in the 80s for a little while there.
Dino was a huge movie. He was in one hit after another. And he leaves to get punched in the face. So he did not have your traditional Hollywood career. And Aronofsky, at one point, we couldn't get the funding we needed. We were trying to get 18 million. I'm sitting at these funding meetings. They eventually gave us 6 million, which sounds like a lot of money to the average person, but this is a whole movie, and that's like the food budget on the Avengers today. This is not a big amount of money. And so Aronofsky was considering Nicolas Cage. And at one point, we actually met up with him, and I spent the evening with him. I took him to a Ring of Honor at the Manhattan Center, and super nice guy, And we're watching the Ring of Honor show on monitors backstage, And he goes, Evan, is this real, like UFC? I go, no. You know, like he didn't even know what he was watching.
Yeah.
But great guy. And Aronofsky said the same thing. Super nice guy, down to earth, regular guy, made you feel totally comfortable. And he was a big star at that point, that era.
We gotta start wrapping up here, Evan. I apologize.
Oh, no problem.
But I'd be remiss not to ask. Being a Brooklyn kid, are you a Dodgers fan?
No, that was way before my time. When I was in Brooklyn in the 70s, Ebbets Field was an apartment building. It was long gone.
Are you a Mets fan like John?
Yeah, I'm a Mets fan. I think.
Oh man.
Mets are more blue collar. Yankees are a little more elitist.
But
the Yankees had their.
I agree with you on that one.
The Yankees had their $2,500 behind the catches, behind the catcher seats, $2,500, and they couldn't sell any of it, so they graciously lowered it to $1,250. So I don't have the same feeling for the Yankees. I mean, if they're in the World Series or whatnot, I'll certainly root for them. You know, it's still a New York team, but
good point. Well, John, I'll turn it over to you to say our parting words here.
Evan, it was a blast having you on. Definitely want to have you on again. Whenever you like. Definitely want to, especially going down the history of wrestling. Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot.
Thank you so much, and check out my book, Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. I have 100+ stories. I was at Madison Square Garden the night Jimmy Snuka jumped on Morocco. I was at the Garden when Bruno and Billy Graham had their iconic battles, et cetera, so on. And it's not just wrestling. It's basically my life in 100+ stories, including the making of The Wrestler. And,
where can we get that?
It's on Amazon. That's the easiest. Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets, because I basically juggled 3 careers: filmmaker, teacher, and wrestling agent. And I'm the senior editor over at ProWrestlingStories.com. And the book is from WOHW Publishers, Kenny Casanova, and he did the Sabu book. So all of a sudden that's hot again, because Sabu named names, boy. He named the guys that did them wrong in that book. It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, but I definitely want to go buy that book. Definitely want to have you back on to kind of go into that book a little bit more, just to kind of talk about the stories, because this was a lot of fun. As somebody like me who is very big, I mean, we were talking before about with baseball. As much as I'm a new school type of person, there's been times where I've been like doing something, and also like I'll have on an old Met game.
Yeah. Because
I just love the history. Because I was like, if you can't appreciate the history, how can you appreciate what you have now?
I was there for much of the history. I basically went every month from 74 to 85. By 86, Vince went like full circus, and I wasn't as enamored, and I was more an NWA fan, going to Philly every month.
And that's funny, because that's when I pick up, is in 1986.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, Randy Savage was great, and later Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels was great. It's not that I totally lost interest. I just thought the NWA from the mid to late 80s was a better product, a better wrestling product. And to see Flair and the Horsemen, Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, the Russians, Magnum, Dusty, it was so talent-laden, that promotion. Guys like Billy Graham and Jimmy Valiant, who were main eventers in WWF, they were mid-card over there. The undercard had Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez and guys like that. That the talent was unbelievable, that promotion. And the last great year was really 89. I was there for Terry Funk and Ric Flair, the I Quit match. And I saw a lot of history. I was there the night Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid came out at Madison Square Garden. We sat there with our mouths open. We never saw anything like this. There was no internet.
No.
You know, it was a super heavyweight territory. These guys were doing moves we never saw. It was, a lot of history back then. And it's good that you guys, at least if you didn't catch some of the earlier stuff, a lot of it's available on video. So, a lot of the old school TV promotions erased the tapes to save a few bucks.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
that's what gave
$25. They erased the tapes.
That's what gave rise to tape trading, amongst us, Evan. But John, we got to get going. I think we owe it to ourselves to get that book and have Evan back. What do you say?
I'm going to be going to Amazon as soon as we get off the show and purchasing it.
Thank you. Enjoy. It's from the heart. It's from the heart. A lot of lost friends, Johnny Valiant, Melissa Coates, Nikolai, Killer Kowalski. These were dear friends. I was on the road with them as an agent, and I tell the story of them, who they were as people. It's not a bombardment of dates and title changes. It's a different kind of book. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely look forward to reading it. And definitely, Evan, want to definitely have you back on, talk about that book. And like I said, if you have, other books that are in the works that are coming out, you're more than welcome to come back on here to promote it. We definitely love to have you back on again.
Thank you. By the end of the year, we'll have a book out on John Tolos. He was one of my heroes. I love that guy.
Absolutely.
Right,
again,
Evan, we look forward to having you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the support. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening, Evan.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, John, I want to apologize to our fans because we promised a Backlash review. I know you and I spoke about me being kind of like the guy to talk about Raw and SmackDown, and I'm sorry we didn't get to any of that tonight, but in terms of wrestling fandom, I think we got some of the best quality stories that you're going to get
tonight. Yeah. Like I said with Evan, I could have him on for hours, just talk. Because to me, I always feel like when we talk pro wrestling, and we're going to wrap up here in a minute or two, but I just want to say this one thing. When we talk pro wrestling, we always talk about what we see on, Monday Night Raw or SmackDown or NXT. We're always talking about the present and the now. Or, the present and the future. You never really hear anybody talking about the past. Devon Era.
And to have not one, but two guests on to give us a spiel, a history of wrestling from the late 60s all the way through to the modern era. I'll take that, any day. I mean, we could have talked Backlash for 20 minutes and, talk about Jeff Cobb and all that stuff. But I mean, the fact is, I think we gave our audience one of the best quality shows tonight in terms of just true wrestling story.
Yeah. And I also owe you a huge thank you for holding down the fort in the beginning.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I hope I did well.
You did very well. But guys, we do have to wrap things up here. I know I didn't get to any of the comments tonight, but guys, next week on the show, like I said before, Anthony Cole will be joining us, and there might be a possibility. Jeff, I'll tell you who the name is offline, but there might be a possibility we might also have a wrestler come on next week who was released by the WWE recently.
Well, we look forward to it, John.
So we got that coming up. Obviously, we got a few announcements coming up in the next couple of weeks because the show is getting to different levels. Again, guys, we appreciate everybody who watched. Tune in next week, 8 o'clock start time. Hopefully the internet connection will do well for me, so we won't have all the issues again. And guys, again, stay tuned to all of our social media accounts for all the latest updates because, things are really on the move, so to speak. And guys, for Jeff, I'm John. We'll catch you guys next time.